All right. Welcome, my little Plato loving club. All right. We are going to do part three today for the reading of the Philebus. Maybe we'll finish and maybe we won't. Who knows? But we're on page 35 of 50 something. So probably I would assume that we might finish this today. As a quick reminder, for those who may just be tuning in, the first two readings for the Philebus dialogue on the nature of judging the good, how do we do it, what standards do we use, are in the links in the description box, so those can be watched. The link to the actual text itself is also in the description box, which people can download, read, think about, take notes. Does anybody want to do, or does anybody feel like recapping any key elements that might be resonating in their memory that gave them either pleasure or pain from last week? As we anticipate going into either a pleasurable or painful or both experience in the future, in the future minutes ahead.
Pleasure and pain seem to alternate on an hourly basis here these days, Matt.
Yeah.
Depends on what I'm reading.
Well, we don't. Yeah, what was that, Kelly?
I learned to trust my that inherent goodness, whatever that is. I don't know if we've ever defined the word what good is.
He did not actually fully define what good is. That's a good point.
That's a good point. I'm thinking universal truth. That would have to be good, right?
Yeah, that would be mine as well. Striving for it at least.
Quan thinks that he did. Quan thinks that he did define truth a little bit more. All right, Quan.
Well, I would not say that is the absolute definition, but I beg to differ because I offer an operational definition of good, which is the harmony between the finite in us and the infinite in us. So the evil is not necessarily the finite because we tend to label our poor body mind as the source of all evil, which is a caricature because it is the source of pleasure and of displeasure, but rather something more interesting, operationally speaking, is precisely the lack of harmony or the lack of consciousness the lack of consciousness that there is a finite part in us and there is an infinite part in us. First, second, that those two, I call the finite part the time dimension and the infinite reality, the infinite being precisely, or the infinite awareness, and that one that we have to be aware of the two, the existence of the two, and that they can be combined, and there is a causality that makes that combination possible and healthy, and that that is something that can be promoted.
So bad is basically disharmony of the finite and the infinite.
Well, Kelly, you don't know to what extent you flatter the Chinese in me by using harmony.
Well, I'm just going by what you're saying. I have to digest it all, but I can't argue with you right now. It sounds good.
Okay, but please think about that and bring some argument next time. And I'm an argumentative person.
It's good.
Argumentative as opposed to disputive.
Yes, always in a playful dialectical exploration.
Yes. As it should be.
Yeah.
I see that, Paul, you understand me. Thank you.
I try hard, Quan.
Well, definitely the coexistence of pains and pleasure, especially when introducing the time function of the past and the future, where memories and anticipations of the future tend to exist, where the imagination tends to exist, gets very, very, it becomes much more complex. And I remember that Plato was really, or Socrates was really working hard to help this young person come to terms with the idea that you can judge certain types of pleasures as actually being false. And this young guy it's like a program. He just can't, he comes close to the discovery, and then you could just see the internal sentinel just impose the glitch, and he reverts back to, but pleasures are always good. And we're definitely entertaining this question: will can certain opinions or expectations be false? And certainly, we can assume that. So what about the pleasures that are associated with opinions that are false? Would not those pleasures also be contaminated with the same falseness that maybe, you know, uh, drugs are, heroin is healthy for me, it's good for me, so the pleasure I get from heroin is good. But that was maybe an ill-founded opinion, and maybe the actual pleasure you're getting is actually causing you damage. Maybe it's not, but the guy can't quite allow himself to go there yet. So we'll see if it's possible for him to make that leap or not.
Another reoccurring theme, he keeps talking about past, present, and future as well.
Yes.
When we're talking about our like our feeling, not our feelings, but our senses, and and how we feel our emotions, I guess is the right word.
Yep. Yep. Yep, for sure.
And I just want to say that we were especially delighted by an excerpt or by the paragraph when he was exploring the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious dimensions of the mind with emotions as a major anchor.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think that's around the time where we ended the
Yes.
Okay, so with that, let's launch into it. Let me do a little share here. As I said, we're on page 34 of 59, so we still have 25 for 5 more pages. So we may not make it, but we'll see. So in yellow is where around about the spot that we ended, where he's describing here good, but are we or living things in general always conscious of what happens to us, for example, of our growth or the like? Are we not, on the contrary, almost wholly unconscious of this and similar phenomena? You must answer for them. Describing here that, the part of us that is aware of the joys that we have or the pleasures that we have is actually not aware of a lot of the experiences we have that may be subtle pleasure or pains that we're not even aware of. And then we have the slow time function too. So who would like to be today's Socrates, and who would like to be today's Protarchus?
If no one wants to, I could still be Protarchus.
You are Protarchus.
Continuity's sake, I'll happily be Socrates.
Continuity is smiling upon us all. Okay, good.
The only minor problem here, Matt, is sound. It's raining at the moment.
Oh, we couldn't even tell in this case. I think there's certain kinds of sounds that Zoom is very good at filtering out.
I've kind of got a fan on one side of me and rain on the other side, so it's canceling out, I think.
Oh, so are you saying you can't hear us very well?
No, I can hear fine. It's not raining very heavily, but
Okay.
it's
okay. We
can't.
can hear nothing. It's only when you have a salesperson outside of your window selling like peanuts, yell really loud, then we can hear it. but rain natural sounds like this, fans seem to be working nicely. So yeah, go for it. You're Socrates. Kelly, you're Protarchus. All right, that works.
So shall we start? Here we go. To them we will say, good, but are we, or living things in general, always conscious of what happens to us? For example, of our growth or the like. Are we not, on the contrary, almost wholly unconscious of this and similar phenomena? You must answer for them.
The latter alternative is the true one.
Then we were not right in saying just now that motions going up and down cause pleasures and pains.
True.
A better and more unexceptional way of speaking will be
Of what?
if we say that the great changes produce pleasures and pains, but the moderate and lesser ones do neither.
That, Socrates, is the more correct mode of speaking.
But if this be true, the life to which I was just now referring again appears.
What, life?
The life which we affirm to be devoid either of pain or of joy.
Very true.
We may assume then that there are three lives, one pleasant, one painful, and the third which is neither. What say you?
I should say, as you do, that there are three of them.
But if so, the negation of pain will not be the same with pleasure.
Certainly not.
Then when you hear a person saying that always to live without pain is the pleasantest of all things, what would you understand him to mean by that statement?
I think that by pleasure he must mean the negative of pain.
Let us take any three things, or suppose that we embellish a little and call the first gold, the second silver, and there shall be a third which is neither.
Very good.
Now, can that which is neither be either gold or silver?
Impossible.
No more can that neutral or middle life be rightly or reasonably spoken or thought of as pleasant or painful.
Certainly not.
And yet, my friend, there are, as we know, persons who say and think so.
Certainly.
And do they think that they have pleasure when they are free from pain?
They say so.
And they must think, or they would not say that they have pleasure.
I suppose not.
And yet, if pleasure and the negation of pain are of distinct natures, they are wrong.
But they are undoubtedly of distinct natures.
Then shall we take the view that that they are three, as we were just now saying, or that they are two only, the one being a state of pain, which is an evil, and the other a cessation of pain, which is of itself a good and is called pleasure?
But why, Socrates, do we ask the question at all? I do not see the reason.
You, Protarchus, have clearly never heard of certain enemies of our friends Philebus.
And who may that be? Or who may they be?
Certain persons who are reputed to be masters in natural philosophy, who deny the very existence of pleasure.
Indeed.
They say that what the school of Philebus calls pleasures are all of them only avoidances of pain.
And would you, Socrates, have us agree with them?
Why, no, I would rather use them as sort of diviners who divine the truth not by rules of art, but by an instinctive repugnance and extreme detestation which a noble nature has of the power of pleasure, in which they think that there is nothing sound, and her seductive influence is declared by them to be witchcraft and not pleasure. This is the use which you may make of them, and when you have considered the various grounds of their dislike, you shall hear from me what I deem to be true pleasures. Having thus examined the nature of pleasure from both points of view, we will bring her up for judgment.
Well said.
I got a quick question here. Is he referring to the or does anybody know if he's referring to the sort of the Stoic school? Do the Stoics allow for pleasure to exist, or is pleasure defined as an absence or a negation of pain?
Excellent question, Matthew. I would like to intervene here with your permission and with the permission of the others.
Granted.
Yeah.
And that is precisely not the theory of the Stoic or the Stoicism, but a kind of preliminary. Okay, because the Stoicism perspective or the Stoic perspective is well known to say the following: better not have too much pleasure because pleasure has its counterpart, which is pain. So the Stoic is a kind of monkish solution. Okay, I'm not sure that the word monkish exists in English, but the attitude of a monk, meaning asceticism. And I think that in English, when you say that someone is a Stoic person, it means that he has an ascetic attitude, okay, that he would relinquish pleasure. But the philosophical idea behind that is that if you don't have too much pleasure, you would have less pain because it's the same vibratory bodily answer to phenomena. What, of course, I think that you all see where is the problem here, I suppose.
Go on.
The problem here is that if you don't have deep roots, you cannot have a big tree, meaning that you have to be capable to go deeply into pain as to go deeply into pleasure. But there is a third epistemological point, which is called infinite awareness, in the sense that because at the center of the Philebus is do you choose between a life of wisdom or a life of pleasure? Okay. It is absurd to have a wisdom without pleasure. It would be a little bit boring. And if you choose pleasure without wisdom, it might be a little bit foolish or dangerous. So the solution is you need both. Once again, I'm coming back to what I said at the beginning of our discussion. The good is precisely the dialectical dance or the harmony between the finite reality of ourselves and the infinite reality of ourselves. So the Stoic solution is a monkish solution, okay? The solution of a monk, okay? Asceticism. Well, it gives birth to wise people in inverted coma, but not very enthusiastic, not very alive, not very happy. So it's not truly a solution, and it's also the solution of Kant. And Schiller blamed him precisely for his monkish solution too, meaning that the Kantian solution was a kind of a Stoic solution too, in the sense that you are moral because it is the categorical imperative that is Kant's expression, the categorical imperative that it is your duty to be moral. So there was no need to write a 300 pages philosophical book for that. In any religious preaching, you have exactly the same thing. So that is why it is that paragraph is absolutely vital, because once again, the central question of the Philebus is that you don't have to choose between wisdom without pleasure or wisdom or pleasure without wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
The solution is the harmony of the two.
Yeah.
And coming back to your example, Matt, of the heroine, maybe that heroine might give you pleasure in inverted coma, but if you have wisdom, you would not choose a pleasure that have a nefarious consequence. One of the functions of wisdom is precisely, and it's about what we said too, is to be capable to navigate between the past, the present, and the future. Okay, using imagination and dialectical capacity to explore. So there's no need to relinquish pleasure, but there are pleasure who are more healthy for you than others. So the whole Philebus is about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that paragraph is precisely to pinpoint some mistakes of the Stoic perspective.
I see. That's good. Thank you, Quine. Yeah, and I think too the idea that because he's playing a lot with ideas of frequency, of harmony, as a visual or as a metaphor to help us sort of zero in on these ideas that pertain to the finite and the infinite. And what he was just saying too about it wasn't his words bandwidth, but that's what it got me thinking when he was describing the high amplitude pleasures and pains that could be thought to coexist with the middle, like low bandwidth, like in the middle ground, where I was thinking about eating, in some kinds of foods give you intense pleasure, but they're more inclined to being something that you could treat irresponsibly, sugar addictions, chocolate, other things that give you a lot more pleasure than the more subtle flavors. They leave you either regretting yourself because you ate too much, addicted so that you want more, or then in pain because now you have a toothache, whereas the more subtle bandwidths that I guess you could say a more refined palate would desire don't really give you as many of those extreme pleasures, but they give you satisfaction nonetheless. It's not like you're eating sponges, just to stay alive or something, or eating grass. It's not like you're doing that. But there's this, as he's defining this mysterious third neutral state, which I don't think is really neutral in the sense that he's playing with it, but he's toying around with words and helping us to sort of like shape new context into the words that we take for granted. So what is this other state?
Yes, because when he said that the third kind of life is neither pain or pleasure, he was not speaking of something drab or empty. He was speaking precisely of that infinite awareness that would make you capable to be present when you are in your life. And because of that, you would be not between, for example, eating like a pig and after that, not eating for many days, either because you don't want to lose weight or because you have to be careful about your health. And that is precisely the mind, the unconscious and the subconscious mind. Unconscious and a subconscious mind is a yo-yo play between indulgence and control. Okay? And the only way to escape between indulgence and control is to go to that deeper third point, which is neither.
Fun.
Yeah, the opposite. I agree with you, Quan. The opposite of what you were saying, Matt, would be like I'm a bad person and I got to tie a cannonball to my foot and walk through a thorn bushes for the rest of my life because that's going to make me a better person.
That's it. Yeah, that I guess could be a logical extreme that one of these self-flagellating shame-based people would conclude. Yeah.
But that is precisely the solution of the monk.
Right.
Okay.
But we think it's good. We think it's good for us,
Yeah, but that's
the pleasure of pain.
Yeah, but it's not the fact that you think that is good for you that is interesting. Do you have the epistemological level to identify what is truly good for you? Do you have the awareness to identify it? Because if you don't have it, you can take the answer of anyone.
Yeah.
And that anyone doesn't necessarily in favor of your good, precisely.
Well said.
Well said.
I won't bring it up now, but maybe before we finish today, it would be good to have a brief discussion on the idea of harmony. Because I think that is central to the discussion that we're having. This idea of, choosing between, wisdom without pleasure, pleasure without wisdom, or whatever. I mean, somewhere along the way, there is a need to harmonize.
Absolutely.
I think harmony is central to so many things. I mean, I can give plenty of musical examples, but if I give another one that may or may not be a good one, but if you take something like a Birkeland current, for example, there are, just like there are in music, there are consonant elements in a Birkeland current, and there are the opposite of that. And torsion seems to be the thing that creates harmony, that allows that structure to exist and to do structures to exist and do what they do.
What do you mean by torsion?
Torsion is a process of, let me think. The best example I can give is an analogy. If you take a soda can and you twist it, that's torsion.
Yeah.
And from what I understand of, models of the electric universe and just models in electromagnetism generally, torsion plays a very, very big part in creating structures.
Yeah.
So how do you relate that with harmony? Like
I'm using it as an analogy in the same way that I could use it in music, of course, movement away from a tonic chord to a dissonant chord and the resolution of that creates consonance and harmony. There is this tension that exists within music. And I would, from my understanding, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this, far from it, the same thing applies to elements of electromagnetism and certain creative processes in the universe that take two opposing things, positive, negative charge or whatever, and through the motion of torsion, it allows a kind of harmony to exist such that things like Birkeland currents can be used to, can be seen to be points of focus. And what I mean by that is, the little pinches in a Birkeland current are said to be what creates planets and suns and goodness knows what else. I'm being very simplistic here. I'm trying to be fast in my response. I don't want to take the conversation too far in another direction, but it seems to me the important thing here is the idea of harmonizing disparate ideas. Yeah. That seems to be the key to what we're really, Quan, you've said it many times. Maybe it's a Chinese approach, I don't know, but it seems to me that's at the heart of what we're talking about.
Yeah, but when you speak about harmony, you have the image is that you have different forces in presence, okay? Yeah. The force that pushes you to have pleasure and the force that is push you to be in infinite awareness. Those two group of forces will have to dance together, okay? I always come back to the image of dance because for me it's obvious. And it's like a man and woman dancing together, okay? The man is a force, the woman is a force. How those two forces can be together in a beautiful manner, okay? That is harmony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in that sense, I have this idea as well. When you think of torsion and the spinning of like two opposing directions spinning in conjunction with each other, you're sort of dealing with two opposites. Dissonance, whatever, there's opposites everywhere, right? Light, shade, everything that have to be balanced out in such a lawful manner that it produces something which is natural and good. And if it's done in a sloppy way, you can make a bad mess. So it's definitely this question of beauty and harmony comes into play for sure in science, in philosophy, and all of the different concepts we could be playing with. It's a useful idea. So we could definitely hit at that more in the conversation. Following
remember this. That image. Remember.
Oh, there you go.
Image.
Torsion. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, torsion. and dance.
Yeah.
Because you have a curve. And inside a circle, which is the image of the absolute, but let's not forget, but you have that to imagine that the circle is not a closed and finite circle. You have to imagine that it is an infinite circle, an open circle. Because when you make calligraphy, you never close a circle. You always let a space that the circle is not completely closed to symbolize that it is open to the infinite.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
If you see a Chinese making a circle would completely close, that person is not Chinese.
That's me.
Yeah, but you're not Chinese, Kelly.
I'll never write the letter O the same again.
Yeah. So never close your circle.
No. For the right reasons.
Yeah, for the right reason. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Then let us enter into an alliance with these philosophers and follow in the track of their dislike. I imagine that they would say something of this sort. They would begin at the beginning and ask whether, if we wanted to know the nature of inequality, such as hardness, we should be more likely to discover it by looking at the hardest things, rather than at the least hard. You, Petrarchus, shall answer these severe gentlemen as you answer me.
By all means. And I reply to them, that you should look at the greatest instances.
Then if we want to see the true nature of pleasures as a class, we should not look at the most diluted pleasures, but at the most extreme and most vehement.
In that, everyone will agree.
And the obvious instances of the greatest pleasure, as we have often said, are the pleasures of the body.
Certainly.
And are they felt by us to be or become greater when we are sick or when we are in health? And here we must be careful in our answer, or we shall come to grief.
How will that be?
Why? Because we might be tempted to answer when we are in health.
Yes, that is the natural answer.
Well, but are not these pleasures the greatest of which mankind have the greatest desires?
True.
And do not people who are in favor or any similar, who are in a fever or any similar illness feel cold or thirst or other bodily affections more intensely? Am I not right in saying that they have a deeper want and greater pleasure in the satisfaction of their want?
That is obvious as soon as it is said.
Well then, shall we not be right in saying that if a person would wish to see the greatest pleasures, he ought to go and look not at health, but at disease? And here you must distinguish. Do not imagine that I mean to ask whether those who are very ill have more pleasures than those who are well, but understand that I am speaking of the magnitude of pleasure. I want to know where pleasures are found to be most intense. For as I say, we have to discover what is pleasure and what they mean by pleasure who deny her very existence.
I think I follow you.
You will soon have a better opportunity of showing whether you do or not, Petrarchus. Answer now and tell me whether you see, I will not say more, but more intense and excessive pleasures in wantonness than in temperance. Reflect before you speak.
I understand you, and I see that there is a great difference between them. The temperate are restrained by the wise man's aphorism of never too much, which is their rule, but excess of pleasure possessing the minds of fools and wantons become madness and makes them shout with delight.
Very good. And if this be true, then the greatest pleasures and pains will clearly be found in some vicious state of soul and body, and not in a virtuous state.
Certainly.
And ought we not to select some of these for examination and see what makes them the greatest?
To be sure we ought.
Take the case of the pleasures which arise out of certain disorders.
What disorders?
The pleasures of unseemly disorders, which our severe friends utterly detest.
What pleasures?
Such, for example, as the relief of itching and other ailments by scratching, which is the only remedy required. For what in heaven's name is the feeling to be called which is thus produced in us, pleasure or pain?
A villainous mixture of some kind, Socrates, I should say.
I did not introduce the argument of Petrarchus with any personal reference to Philebus, but because without the consideration of these and similar pleasures, we shall not be able to determine the point at issue.
Then we had better proceed to analyze this family of pleasures.
You mean the pleasures which are mingled with pain?
Exactly.
There are some mixtures which are of the body and only in the body, and others which are of the soul and only in the soul. While there are other mixtures of pleasures with pains, common both to soul and body, which in their composite state are called sometimes pleasures and sometimes pains.
How is that?
Whenever in the restoration or in the derangement of nature, a man experiences two opposite feelings. For example, when he is cold and is growing warm, or again, when he is hot and is becoming cool, and he wants to have the one and be rid of the other. The sweet has a bitter, as the common saying is, and both together fasten upon him and create irritation and in time drive him to distraction.
That description is very true to nature.
And in these sorts of mixtures, the pleasures and pains are sometimes equal and sometimes one or other of them predominates.
True.
Of cases in which the pain exceeds the pleasure, An example is afforded by itching, of which we were just now speaking, and by the tingling which we feel when the boiling and fiery elements is within, and the rubbing and motion only relieves the surface and does not reach the parts affected. Then if you put them to the fire, and as a last resort apply cold to them, you may often produce the most intense pleasure or pain in the inner parts, which contrasts and mingles with the pain or pleasure, as the case may be, of the outer parts. And this is due to the forcible separation of what is united, or to the union of what is separated, and to the juxtaposition of pleasure and pain.
Quite so.
Sometimes the element of pleasure prevails in a man, and the slight undercurrent of pain makes him tingle and causes a gentle irritation. Or again, the excessive infusion of pleasure creates an excitement in him. He even leaps for joy. He assumes all sorts of attitudes. He changes all manner of colours, he gasps for breath, and is quite amazed, and utters the most irrational exclamations.
Yes, indeed.
He will say of himself, and others will say of him, that he is dying with these delights. And the more dissipated and good for nothing he is, the more vehemently he pursues them in every way. Of all pleasures, he declares them to be the greatest, and he reckons him who lives in the most constant enjoyment of them to be the happiest of mankind.
That, Socrates, is a very true description of the opinions of the majority about pleasures.
Yes, Petrarchus, quite true, of the mixed pleasures, which arise out of the communion of external and internal sensations in the body. There are also cases in which the mind contributes an opposite element to the body, whether of pleasure or pain, and the two unite and form one mixture. Concerning these, I have already remarked that when a man is empty, he desires to be full, and has pleasure in hope and pain in vacuity. But now I must further add what I omitted before, that in all these and similar emotions in which body and mind are opposed, and they are innumerable, pleasure and pain coalesce in one.
I believe that to be quite true.
There still remains one other sort of admixture of pleasures and pains.
What is that?
The union which, as we were saying, the mind often experiences of purely mental feelings.
What do you mean?
Why, do we not speak of anger, fear, desire, sorrow, love, emulation, envy, and the like as pairs which belong to the soul only?
Yes.
And shall we not find them also full of the most wonderful pleasures? Need I remind you of the anger, which stirs even a wise man to violence, and is sweeter than honey and the honeycomb? And you remember how pleasures mingle with pains in lamentation and bereavement.
Yes, there is a natural connection between them.
And you remember also how at the sight of tragedies, the spectators smile through their tears.
Certainly they do.
And you are aware that even at a comedy, the soul experiences a mixed feeling of pain and pleasure.
I do not quite understand.
I admit, Petrarchus, that there is some difficulty in recognizing this mixture of feelings at a comedy.
There is, I think.
And the greater the obscurity of the case, the more desirable is the examination of it, because the difficulty in detecting other cases of mixed pleasures and pains will be less.
Proceed.
I have just mentioned envy. Would you not call that a pain of the soul?
Yeah.
And yet the envious man finds something in the misfortunes of his neighbours at which he is pleased.
Certainly.
And ignorance, what is termed clownishness, are surely an evil.
To be sure.
From these considerations, learn to know the nature of the ridiculous.
Can you explain?
The ridiculous is, in short, the specific name which is used to describe the vicious form of a certain habit. And of vice in general, it is that kind which is most at variance with the inscription at Delphi.
You mean, Socrates, know thyself?
I do, and the opposite would be know not thyself.
Certainly.
And now, O Petrarchus, try to divide this into three.
Indeed, I'm afraid that I can't.
Do you mean to say that I must make the division for you?
Yeah, And what is more, I beg that you will.
Are there not three ways in which ignorance of self may be shown?
What are they?
In the first place, about money. The ignorant may fancy himself richer than he is.
Yeah, that is a very common error.
And still more often, he will fancy that he is taller or fairer than he is, or that he has some other advantage of person which he really has not.
Of course.
And yet, surely by far the greatest number err about the goods of the mind. They imagine themselves to be much better men than they are.
Yes, that is by far the commonest delusion.
And of all the virtues, is not wisdom the one which the mass of mankind are always claiming, and which most arouses in them a spirit of contention and lying conceit of wisdom?
Certainly.
And may not all this be truly called an evil condition?
Very evil.
But we must pursue the division a step further, Petrarchus, if we would see in envy of the childish thought a singular mixture of pleasure and pain.
How can we make the further division which you suggest?
All who are silly enough to entertain this lying conceit of themselves may of course be divided, like the rest of mankind, into two classes, one having power and might, and the other the reverse.
Certainly.
Let this then be the principle of division. Those of them who are weak and unable to revenge themselves when they are laughed at may be truly called ridiculous, but those who can defend themselves may be more truly described as strong and formidable. For ignorance in the powerful is hateful and horrible, because hurtful to others both in reality and in fiction. But powerless ignorance may be reckoned, and in truth is, ridiculous.
That is very true. But I do not as yet see where the admixture of pleasure and pains.
Well then, let us examine the nature of envy.
Proceed.
Is not envy an unrighteous pleasure and also an unrighteous pain?
That's most true.
There is nothing envious or wrong in rejoicing at the misfortunes of enemies.
Certainly not.
But to feel joy instead of sorrow at the sight of our friends' misfortunes, is not that wrong?
Undoubtedly.
Do we not say that ignorance was always an evil?
True.
And the three kinds of vain conceit in our friends which we enumerated, the vain conceit of beauty, of wisdom, and of wealth, are ridiculous if they are weak, and detestable when they are powerful. May we not say, as I was saying before, that our friends who are in this state of mind, when harmless to others, are simply ridiculous?
They are ridiculous.
And do we not acknowledge this ignorance of theirs to be a misfortune?
Certainly.
And do we feel pain or pleasure in laughing at it?
Clearly, we feel pleasure.
And was not envy the source of this pleasure which we feel at the misfortunes of friends?
Yeah.
Then the argument shows that when we laugh at the folly of our friends, pleasure, in mingling with envy, mingles with pain. For envy has been acknowledged by us to be a mental pain, and laughter is pleasant, and so we envy and laugh at the same instant.
True.
And the argument implies that there are combinations of pleasure of pain in lamentations and in tragedy and comedy, not only on the stage, but on the greater stage of human life, and so in endless other cases.
I do not see how anyone can deny what you say, Socrates. However eager he may be to assert the opposite opinion.
I mentioned anger, desire, sorrow, fear, love, emulation, envy, and similar emotions as examples in which we should find the mixture of the two elements so often named, did I not?
Yeah.
We may observe that our conclusions hitherto have had reference only to sorrow and envy and anger.
I see.
And many other cases still remain.
Certainly.
And why do you suppose me to have pointed out to you the admixture which takes place in comedy? Why? But to convince you that there was no difficulty in showing the mixed nature of fear and love and similar affections. And I thought that when I had given you the illustration, you would have let me off, and have acknowledged as a general truth that the body without the soul and the soul without the body, as well as the two united, are susceptible of all sorts of admixtures of pleasures and pains, and so further discussion would have been unnecessary. And now I want to know whether I may depart, or will you keep me here until midnight? I fancy that I may obtain my release without many words, if I promise that tomorrow I will give you an account of all these cases. But at present I would rather sail in another direction and go to other matters which remain to be settled before the judgment can be given which Philebus demands.
Very good, Socrates. And what remains? Take your own course.
Then after the mixed pleasures, the unmixed should have their turn. That is the natural and necessary order.
Excellent.
These in turn, then, I will now endeavour to indicate. For with the maintenance of the opinion that all pleasures are a cessation of pain, I do not agree. But as I was saying, I use them as witnesses, that there are pleasures which seem only and are not, and there are others again which have great power and appear in many forms, yet are intermingled with pains and are partly alleviations of agony and distress, both of body and mind.
Then what pleasures, Socrates, should we be right in conceiving to be true?
True pleasures are those which are given by beauty of colour and form, and most of those which arise from smells, those of sound, again, and in general those of which the want is painless and unconscious, and of which the fruition is palpable to sense and pleasant and unallied with pain.
Once more, Socrates, I must ask you, what do you mean?
My meaning is certainly not obvious, and I will endeavour to be plainer. I do not mean by my beauty of form such beauty as that of animals or pictures, which the many would suppose to be my meaning. But, says the argument, understand me to mean straight lines and circles, and the plain or solid figures which are formed out of them by turning lathes and rulers and measurers of angles. For these I affirm to be not only relatively beautiful, like other things, but they are eternally and absolutely beautiful, and they have peculiar pleasures, quite unlike the pleasures of scratching. And there are colours which are of the same character and have similar pleasures. Now do you understand my meaning?
I'm trying to understand, Socrates, but I hope that you will try to make your meaning a little bit clearer.
When sounds are smooth and clear and have a single pure tone, then I mean to say that they are not relatively but absolutely beautiful and have natural pleasures associated with them. They resonate.
Yeah. Yes, there are such pleasures.
The pleasures of smell are of a less ethereal sort, but they have no unnecessary admixture of pain. And all pleasures, however and wherever experienced, which are unattended by pains, I assign to an analogous class. Here then are two kinds of pleasures.
I understand.
To these may be added the pleasure of knowledge, if no hunger of knowledge and no pain caused by such hunger precede them.
And this is the case.
Well, but if a man who is full of knowledge loses his knowledge, are there not pains of forgetting?
Not necessarily, but there may be times of reflection when he feels grief at the loss of his knowledge.
Such as in my old age when you forget names that you should remember. Anyway, yes, my friend, but at present we are enumerating only the natural perceptions and have nothing to do with reflection.
In that case, you are right in saying that the loss of knowledge is not attended with pain.
No, these pleasures of knowledge then are unmixed with pain, and they are not the pleasures of the many, but of a very few.
Quite true.
And now, having fairly separated the pure pleasures and those which may rightly be termed impure, let us further add to our description of them, that the pleasures which are in excess have no measure, but that those which are not in excess have measure. The great, the excessive, whether more or less frequent, we shall be right in referring to the class of the infinite, and of the more and less, which pours through body and soul alike, and the others we shall refer to the class which has measure.
Quite right, Socrates.
Still, there is something more to be considered about pleasures.
What is it?
When you speak of purity and clearness, or of excess, abundance, greatness, and sufficiency, in what relation do these terms stand to truth?
Why do you ask, Socrates?
Because, Petrarchus, I should wish to test pleasure and knowledge in every possible way, in order that if there be a pure and impure element in either of them, I may present the pure element for judgment, and then they will be more easily judged, by you and by me and by all of us.
Most true.
Let us investigate all the pure kinds, first selecting for consideration a single instance.
What instance shall we select?
Suppose that we first of all take whiteness.
Very good.
How can there be purity in whiteness, and what purity? Is that purest which is greatest or most in quantity, or that which is most unadulterated and freest from any admixture of other colors, which is what white light is?
Clearly, that is which is most unadulterated.
True, Petrarchus. And so the purest white, and not the greatest or largest in quantity, is to be deemed truest and most beautiful.
Right.
And we should be quite right in saying that a little pure white is whiter and fairer and truer than a great deal that is mixed.
Perfectly right.
There is no need of adducing many similar examples in illustration of the argument about pleasure. One such is sufficient to prove to us that a small pleasure or a small amount of pleasure, if pure or unalloyed with pain, is always pleasanter and truer and fairer than a great pleasure or a great amount of pleasure of another kind.
Assuredly, and the instance you have given is quite sufficient.
But what do you say of another question? Have we not heard that pleasure is always a generation and has no true being? Do not certain ingenious philosophers teach this doctrine, and ought not we be to be grateful to them?
What do you mean?
I will explain to you, my dear Petrarchus, what they mean by putting a question.
Ask and I will answer.
I assume that there are two natures, one self-existent and the other ever in want of something.
What manner of natures are they?
The one majestic ever, the other inferior.
You speak riddles.
Yeah. You have seen loves good and fair, and also brave lovers of them.
I should think so.
Search the universe for two terms which are like these two and are present everywhere.
Yet a third time, I must say, be a little plainer, Socrates.
There is no difficulty, Petrarchus. The argument is only in play and insinuates that some things are for the sake of something else, relatives, and that other things are the ends to which the former class subversive, absolutes.
Your many repetitions make me slow to understand.
I'll correct that last sentence. Subserve, not subversive. As the argument proceeds, my boy, I dare say that the meaning will become clearer.
Very likely.
Here are two new principles.
What are they?
One is the generation of all things, and the other is essence.
I readily accept from you both generation and essence.
Very right. And would you say that generation is for the sake of essence, or essence for the sake of generation?
You want to know whether that which is called essence is, properly speaking, for the sake of generation?
Yes.
By the gods, I wish that you would repeat your question.
I mean, O my Petrarchus, to ask whether you would tell me that shipbuilding is for the sake of ships, or ships for the sake of shipbuilding. Chicken and egg argument there. And in all similar cases, I should ask the same question.
Why don't you answer yourself, Socrates?
I have no objection, but you must take your part.
Certainly.
My answer is that all things instrumental, remedial, material are given to us with a view to generation, and that each generation is relative to, or for the sake of, some being or essence, and that the whole of generation is relative to the whole of essence.
Assuredly.
That's so
And
important. That's so
Yeah.
so important. That's like the essentials for all considerations of inquiries into truth. And a lot of people they try to look at or investigate the universe or philosophy without this conception that he's defining here, that there's these two states of existence of the being and the becoming, of the realm that is unchanging and the realm that is constantly changing. They don't know how to think about the conjunction of these two things, or like how it's so simple, right? They get stuck in these paradoxes, like you guys were joking quickly, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then a lot of people will sort of laugh it off and just treat it like it's an unanswerable question when you're dealing with something as simple as, like, well, shipbuilding, does it exist for the idea of ships, or does the idea of ships exist because of shipbuilding? And it's obviously the case that we develop the art because we want to sail, we have a need to fulfill based on a concept, and so the art and the mechanics are subservient to the higher, what's called the necessary truths. So the contingent truths of the mechanical world are always shaped by the context and the purpose of the higher necessary truths, the primary truths of that higher realm. And you can try this for anything you want. It's a fun exploration.
Yeah, then the thought of sailing would be the essence, and the shipbuilding would be the generation.
Oh, the thought of it would, definitely touch much more on the essence. Yeah.
I'm trying to simplify things here. I mean, Petrarchus is having a hard time understanding Socrates, and so am I sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But everything which is an art is a technique. So if it's a technique, it's a means and not the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we need shipbuilding to provide subsistence for the people who build ships. They have jobs. We need jobs.
Oh, you're thinking about it as an economist now. It's good.
As a politician, yeah.
Let's go one step further. Let's not ask the British Navy to build us any ships. They don't seem to be very good at it anymore. They once were. Anyway, Petrarchus, you're up.
Where are we here?
Why do you not answer yourself?
Why do you not answer yourself, Socrates?
I have no objection, but you must take your part.
Certainly.
My answer is that all things instrumental, remedial, material are given to us with a view to generation, and that each generation is relative to, or for the sake of, some being or essence, and that the whole of generation is relative to the whole of essence.
Assuredly.
Then pleasure, being a generation, must surely be for the sake of some essence.
True.
And that for the sake of which something else is done must be placed in the class of good, and that which is done for the sake of something else in some other class, my good friend.
Most certainly.
Then pleasure, being a generation, will be rightly placed in some other class than that of good.
Quite right.
Then, as I said at first, we ought to be very grateful to him who first pointed out that pleasure was a generation only, and had no true being at all. For he is clearly one who laughs at the notion of pleasure being a good.
Assuredly.
And he would surely laugh also at those who make generation their highest end.
Of whom are you speaking? What do they mean?
I am speaking of those who, when they are cured of hunger or thirst or any other defect by some process of generation, are delighted at the process as if it were pleasure. And they say that they would not wish to live without these and other feelings of a like kind which may be mentioned.
That is certainly what they appear to think.
And is not destruction universally admitted to be the opposite of generation?
Certainly.
Then he who chooses thus would choose generation and destruction, rather than that third sort of life in which, as we were saying, was neither pleasure nor pain, but only the purest possible thought.
He who would make us believe pleasure to be a good is involved in great absurdities, Socrates.
Great indeed. And there is yet another of them.
What is that?
Is there not an absurdity in arguing that there is nothing good or noble in the body or in anything else, but that good is in the soul only, and that the only good of the soul is pleasure, and that courage or temperance or understanding or any other good of the soul is not really a good? And is there not yet a further absurdity in our being compelled to say that he who has a feeling of pain and not of pleasure is bad at the time when he is suffering pain, even though he be the best of men? And again, that he who has a feeling of pleasure, insofar as he is pleased at the time when he is pleased, in that degree excels in virtue.
Nothing, Socrates, can be more irrational than all of this.
And now, having subjected pleasure to every sort of test, let us not appear to be too sparing of mind and knowledge. Let us ring their metal bravely, and see if there be unsoundness in any part, until we have found out what in them is of the purest nature. And then the truest elements, both of pleasure and knowledge, may be brought up for judgment.
Right.
Knowledge has two parts, the one productive and the other educational.
True.
And in the productive or handicraft arts, is not one part more akin to knowledge and the other less? And may not the only part be regarded as the pure, and may not the one part be regarded as the pure and the other as the impure?
Certainly.
Let us separate the superior or dominant elements in each of them.
What are they? How do you separate them?
I mean to say that if arithmetic, mensuration, and weighing can be taken away from any art, that which remains will not be very much.
Not much, certainly.
The rest will be only conjecture and the better use of the senses, which is given by experience and practice, in addition to a certain power of guessing, which is commonly called art and is perfected by attention and pains.
Nothing more, assuredly.
Music, for instance, is full of this empiricism. The sounds are harmonized, not by measure, but by skillful conjecture. The music of the flute is always trying to guess the pitch of each vibrating note, and is therefore mixed up with much that is doubtful and has little which is certain.
Most true.
And the same will be found to hold good of medicine and husbandry and piloting and generalship.
That's very true.
The art of the builder, on the other hand, which uses a number of measures and instruments, attains by their help to a greater degree of accuracy than the other arts.
How is that?
In shipbuilding and house building, and in other branches of the art of carpentering, the builder has his rule, lathe, compass, line, and a most ingenious machine for straightening wood.
Very true, Socrates.
So now let us divide the arts of which we were speaking into two kinds. The arts which, like music, are less exact in their results, and those which, like carpentering, are more exact.
Let us make that division.
Of the latter class, the most exact of all are those which we just now spoke of as primary.
I see that you mean arithmetic and the kindred arts of weighing and measuring.
Certainly, Petrarchus, but are not these also distinguishable into two kinds?
What are the two kinds?
Well, in the first place, arithmetic is of two kinds, one of which is popular and the other philosophical.
What would you distinguish them?
There is
Or
a
how
wide
would you?
difference between them, Petrarchus. Some arithmeticians reckon unequal units, as for example, two armies, two oxen, two very large things, or two very small things. The party who are opposed to them insist that every unit in 10,000 must be the same as every other unit.
Undoubtedly, there is, as you say, a great difference among the votaries of the science, and there may be reasonably supposed to be two sorts of arithmetic.
When we compare the art of mensuration, which is used in building, with philosophical geometry, or the art of computation, which is used in trading with exact calculation, shall we say of either of the pairs that it is one or two?
Of the analogy of what has preceded, I should be of opinion that they were severally true, or severally two.
Right, but do you understand why I have discussed the subject?
I think so, but I should like to be told by you.
The argument has all along been seeking a parallel to pleasure, and true to that original design, has gone on to ask whether one sort of knowledge is purer than another, as one pleasure is purer than another.
clearly, that was the intention.
And has not the argument in what has preceded already shown that the arts have different provinces and vary in their degrees of certainty?
Very true.
And just now, did not the argument first designate a particular art by a common term, thus making us believe in the unity of that art? And then again, as if speaking of two different things, proceed to inquire whether the art as pursued by philosophers or as pursued by non-philosophers has more of certainty and purity.
That is the very question which the argument is asking.
How, Petrarchus, shall we answer the inquiry?
Oh, Socrates, we have reached a point at which the difference of clearness in different kinds of knowledge is enormous.
Then the answer will be the easier.
Certainly, and let us say in reply that those arts into which arithmetic and mensurating enter far surpass all the others, and that these are the arts of science, which they are animated by the pure philosophic impulse, are infinitely superior in accuracy and truth.
Then this is your judgment, and this is the answer which, upon your authority, we will give to all masters of the art of misinterpretation.
What answer?
That there are two arts of arithmetic and two of mensuration, and also several other arts which in like manner have this double nature, and yet only one name.
Let us boldly return this answer to the masters of whom you speak, Socrates, and hope for good luck.
We have explained what we term the most exact arts or sciences.
Very good.
And yet Petrarchus, Dialectic will refuse to acknowledge us if we do not award to her the first place.
And pray, what is dialectic?
Just quick before we go on, do people feel relatively comfortable that they have the gist of the idea of these two arts of arithmetic, or these two types of thinking of knowledge, productive and educational, and how he's defining or discerning the difference in these two different approaches to them?
I'm reading it. I'm having a little difficulty. I'm picturing one of them like as far as the carpenter or the builder going, is he's straightening things out, and he has all these amazing tools. But no, if you can explain more.
Well, he doesn't have to be a philosopher, right? The builder does it. It helps, but it's not necessary. Like, he needs to know number, he needs to measure things. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of considerations of the mechanics that he has to be very good at working with, or else he'll make houses that collapse. But he doesn't have to be philosophical about it, right?
So what's the other
difference
kind
between theoretical and practical?
Yeah, I would like to suggest a very easy answer. It's in the etymology of education.
To bring forth within.
To bring forth what is from within. Okay, so you have the practical, well, first, art in Greek is techne, right? And from techne, we have technique. And everything that has to do with mensurations, with techniques, with doing the stuff with skill and precision. Okay, you don't want your bridge to collapse. You don't want your house to collapse, of course. So that's the practical arithmetics. But the philosophical arithmetics has to be with the educational dimension, as is written in the text. And as I said, the hint is the Latin etymology of education. Okay, so we go back again to the whole of essence and the whole of generation. The whole of generation is precisely, you don't want your bridge to collapse, you don't want your house to collapse, and it's very legitimate, of course. But there is something deeper, which is the whole of essence, and that is the educational purpose, and is to bring forth what is from within. And what is from within precisely? Question mark.
The idea of the bridge, the idea of the house.
Exactly.
Yeah, coming up with like building the house, but yeah, someone has to think of, hey, I need a house or something that'll contain me.
That'll satisfy a reason, a purpose.
A purpose, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the practical purpose that would be satisfied with the technique, with the technique, with the art. But the educational purpose is to bring forth what is from within, the idea, the forms, and what are the three supreme forms. Because
Beauty,
you have
wisdom, and justice.
Well, go on. I think Jean-Sebastien, you're allowed to speak. I see you have thoughts.
I like that, John.
Triangle, circle, and square.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah, that's the symbol.
Is also good.
Yeah. I want to say that Sebastian gave the answer with geometric symbol, okay?
Yeah.
But if you have to give the answer with words, what would be the words?
I would say, well, I would say perhaps
Soul, body, and mind.
Okay, that is the operational definition. I accept that. But they are words that is at the center of the Platonic adventure. The three supreme form. You all know the answer.
I think he's referring
Beauty,
to
truth,
truth,
and justice.
Yeah, and maybe goodness, justice. Yeah,
and goodness,
exactly.
Yeah.
Adrian gave the answer in the chat. Beauty, goodness, and truth. Okay, and that's true that not everyone know that. But beauty, goodness, and truth symbolically in geometry, it's the square, the circle, and the triangle.
Yeah.
Those are Kabbalistic symbols. I want to use the word Kabbalah or Kabbalistic because from time to time, I want to say that there is a lot of mumbo jumbo about Kabbalah, but there is an absolutely healthy form of Kabbalah, okay, which is the absolute equivalent of Platonic dialogues.
Yep.
Sounds good.
Continuing?
Sure.
Okay. Clearly the science which has to do with all that knowledge of which we are now speaking. Talking about dialectic. For I am sure that all men who have a grain of intelligence will admit that the knowledge which has to do with being and reality and sameness and unchangeableness is by far the truest of all. But how would you decide this question, Petrarchus?
I have often heard Gorgias maintain, Socrates, that the art of persuasion far surpassed every other. This, as he says, is by far the best of them all. For to it all things submit, not by compulsion, but rather their own free will. Now, I should not like to quarrel either with you or with him.
You mean to say that you would like to desert if you were not ashamed?
As you please.
May I not have led you into a misapprehension?
How?
Dear Petrarchus, I never asked which was the greatest or best or usefulest of arts or sciences, but which had clearness and accuracy and the greatest amount of truth, however humble and little useful an art. As for Gorgias, if you do not deny that his art has the advantage in usefulness to mankind, he will not quarrel with you for saying that the study of which I am speaking is superior in this particular of essential truth. As in the comparison of white colours, a little whiteness, if that little be only pure, was said to be superior in truth to a great mass which is impure. And now let us give our best attention and consider well, not the comparative use or reputation of the sciences, but the power or faculty, if there be such, which the soul has of loving the truth, and of doing all things for the sake of it. Let us search into the pure element of mind and intelligence, and then we shall be able to say whether the science of which I have been speaking is most likely to possess the faculty, or whether there be some other which has higher claims.
Well, I've been considering, and I can hardly think that any other science or art has a firmer grip of the truth than this.
Do you say so because you observe that the arts in general and those engaged in them make use of opinion and are resolutely engaged in the investigation of matters of opinion? Even he who supposes himself to be occupied with nature is really occupied with the things of this world, how created, how acting or acted upon. Is not this the sort of inquiry in which his life is spent?
True?
He is laboring not after eternal being, but about things which are becoming, or which will or have become.
That's very true.
And can we say that any of these things which neither are or have been nor will be unchangeable, when judged by the strict rule of truth, ever become certain?
That's impossible.
How can anything fixed be concerned with that which has no fixedness?
How indeed?
Then mind and science, when employed about such changing things, do not attain the highest truth.
I should imagine not.
And now let us bid farewell, a long farewell, to you or me or Philebus or Georgius, and urge on behalf of the argument a single point.
What point?
Let us say that the stable and pure and true and unalloyed has to do with the things which are eternal and unchangeable and unmixed, or if not, at any rate, what is most akin to them has, and that all other things are to be placed in a second or inferior class.
That's very true.
And of the names expressing cognition, ought not the fairest be given to the fairest thing?
That is natural.
Are not mind and wisdom the names which are to be honoured most?
Yeah.
And these names may be said to have their truest and most exact application when the mind is engaged in the contemplation of true being.
Certainly.
And these were the names which are adduced of the rivals of pleasure.
Very true, Socrates.
In the next piece, as to the mixture, here are the ingredients, pleasure and wisdom, and we may be accompanied to artists who have their materials ready to their hands.
Yes.
Now we must begin to mix them.
By all means.
But had we not better have a preliminary word and refresh our memories?
Of what?
Of that which I have already mentioned. Well says the proverb that we ought to repeat twice and even thrice that which is good.
Certainly.
Well then, by Zeus, let us proceed, and I will make what I believe to be a fair summary of the argument.
Let me hear.
Philebus says that pleasure is the true end of all living beings, at which all ought to aim, and moreover, that it is the chief good of all, and that the two names good and pleasant are correctly given to one thing and one nature. Socrates, on the other hand, begins by denying this, and further says that in nature as in name they are two, and that wisdom partakes more than pleasure of the good. Is not and was not this what we were saying, Petrarchus?
Certainly.
And is there not and was there not a further point which was conceded between us?
What is that?
That the good differs from all other things.
In what respect?
In that the being who possesses good always, everywhere, and in all things has the most perfect sufficiency and is never in need of anything else.
Exactly.
And did we not endeavour to make an imaginary separation of wisdom and pleasure, assigning to each a distinct life, so that pleasure was wholly excluded from wisdom, and wisdom in like manner had no part whatever in pleasure?
We did.
And did we think that either of them alone would be sufficient?
Certainly not.
And if we erred in any point, then let anyone who will take up the inquiry again and set us right. And assuming memory and wisdom and knowledge and true opinion to belong to the same class, let him consider whether he would desire to possess or acquire, I will not say pleasure, however abundant or intense, if he has no real perception that he is pleased, nor any consciousness of what he feels, nor any recollection, however momentary, of the feeling. But would he desire to have anything at all if these faculties were wanting in him? And about wisdom, I ask the same question. Can you conceive that anyone would choose to have all wisdom absolutely devoid of pleasure, rather than with a certain degree of pleasure, or all pleasure devoid of wisdom, rather than with a certain degree of wisdom?
Certainly not, Socrates. But why repeat such questions anymore?
Then the perfect and universally eligible and entirely good cannot possibly be either of them.
Impossible.
And now we must ascertain the nature of good more or less accurately, in order, as we were saying, that the second place may be duly assigned.
Right.
Have we not found a road which leads towards the good?
What road?
Supposing that a man had to be found, and you could discover in what house he lived, would not that be a great step towards the discovery of the man himself?
Certainly.
And now reason intimates to us, as at our first beginning, that we should seek the good, not in the unmixed. Sorry, Jean, but what you just posted came up on my screen and obscures. There is greater hope of finding that which we are seeking in the life which is well mixed than in that which is not.
Far greater.
Then now let us mingle, Petrarchus, at the same time offering up a prayer to Dionysus or Hephaestus or whoever is the god who presides over the ceremony of mingling.
By all means.
Are we not the cupbearers? And here are two fountains which are flowing at our side. One, which is pleasure, may be likened to a fountain of honey. The other, wisdom, a sober draught in which no wine mingles, is of water unpleasant but healthful. Out of these we must seek to make the fairest of all possible mixtures.
Certainly.
Tell me first, should we be most likely to succeed if we mingled every sort of pleasure with every sort of wisdom?
Perhaps we might.
Yeah, but I should be afraid of the risk, and I think that I can show a safer plan.
What's that?
One pleasure was supposed by us to be truer than another, and one art to be more exact than another.
Certainly.
There was also supposed to be a difference in sciences, some of them regarding only the transient and perishing, and others the permanent and imperishable, and everlasting and immutable. And when judged by the standard of truth, the latter, as we thought, were truer than the former.
Very good and right.
If then we were to begin by mingling the sections of each class which have the most of truth, will not the union suffice to give us the loveliest of lives, or shall we still want some elements of another kind?
I think that we ought to do what you suggest.
Let us suppose a man who understands justice and has reason as well as understanding about the true nature of this and of all other things.
We will suppose such a man.
Will he have enough of knowledge if he is acquainted only with the divine circle and sphere and knows nothing of our human spheres and circles, but uses only divine circles and measures in the building of a house?
The knowledge which is only superhuman, Socrates, is ridiculous in man.
What do you mean? Do you mean that you are to throw into the cup and mingle the impure and uncertain art which uses the false measures in the false circle?
Yes, we must, if any of us is ever to find his way home.
And am I to include music, which, as I was saying just now, is full of guesswork and imitation and is wanting in purity?
Yes, I think that you must, if human life is to be here at all.
Well then, suppose that I give way, and, like a doorkeeper who is pushed and overborne by the mob, I open the door wide, and let knowledge of every sort stream in, and the pure mingle with the impure.
I do not know, Socrates, that any great harm would come of having them all, if only you have the first story.
Well then, shall I let them all flow into what Homer poetically terms a meeting of the waters?
By all means.
There, I have let them in, and now I must return to the fountain of pleasure. For we were not permitted to begin by mingling in a single stream the true portions of both according to our original intention, but the love of all knowledge constrained us to let all the sciences flow in together before the pleasures.
Quite true.
And now the time has come for us to consider about the pleasures also, whether we shall in like manner let them all go at once, or at first only the true one.
It will be by far the safer course to let flow the true ones first.
Let them flow then. And now, if there are any necessary pleasures, as there were arts and sciences necessary, must we not mingle them?
Yes, the necessary pleasures should certainly be allowed to mingle.
The knowledge of the arts has been admitted to be innocent and always useful. And if we say of pleasures in like manner that all of them are good and innocent for all of us at all times, we must let them all mingle.
What shall we say about them? And what course shall we take?
Do not ask me, Petrarchus, but ask the daughters of pleasure and wisdom to answer for themselves.
How do you do that?
Tell us, O beloved, shall we call you pleasures or by some other name? Would you rather live with or without wisdom? I am of the opinion that they would certainly answer as follows.
How?
They would answer, as we said before, that for any single class to be left by itself, pure and isolated, is not good, nor altogether possible, and that if we are to make comparisons of one class with another and choose, there is no better companion than knowledge of things in general, and likewise the perfect knowledge, if that may be, of ourselves in every respect.
And our answer will be, in that ye have spoken well.
Very true. And now let us go back and interrogate wisdom and mind. Would you like to have any pleasures in the mixture? And they will reply, what pleasures do you mean?
Likely enough.
And we shall take up our parable and say, do you wish to have the greatest and most vehement pleasures for your companions in addition to the true ones? Why, Socrates, they will say, how can we, seeing that they are the source of 10,000 hindrances to us? They trouble the souls of men, which are our habitation, with their madness. They prevent us from coming to the birth and are commonly the ruin of the children which are born to us, causing them to be forgotten and unheeded. But the true and pure pleasures of which you spoke know to be of our family, and also those pleasures which accompany health and temperance, and which every virtue, like a goddess, has in her train to follow her about wherever she goes. Mingle these and not the others. There would be great want of sense in anyone who desires to see a fair and perfect mixture, and to find in it what is the highest good in man and in the universe, and to divine what is the true form of good. There would be great want of sense in his allowing the pleasures which are always in the company of folly and vice to mingle with mind in the cup. Is not this a very rational and suitable reply, which mind has made both on her own behalf as well as on the behalf of memory and true opinion?
Most certainly.
And still there must be something more added, which is a necessary ingredient in every mixture.
Well, what's that?
Unless truth enter into the composition, nothing can truly be created or subsist.
Impossible.
Quite impossible. And now you and Philebus must tell me whether anything is still wanting in the mixture. For to my way of thinking, the argument is now completed and may be compared to an incorporeal law, which is going to hold fair rule over a living body.
I agree with you, Socrates.
And may we not say with reason that we are now at the vestibule of the habitation of the good?
I think we are.
What then is there in the mixture which is the most precious, and which is the principal cause why such a state is universally beloved by all? When we have discovered it, we will proceed to ask whether this omnipresent nature is more akin to pleasure or mind.
Quite right. And in that way, we shall be better able to judge, I guess.
And there is no difficulty in seeing the cause which renders any mixture either of the highest value or of none at all.
What do you mean?
Every man knows it.
What?
He knows that any want of measure and symmetry in any mixture whatever must always of necessity be fatal, both to the elements and to the mixture, which is then not a mixture, but only a confused medley which brings confusion on the possessor of it.
Most true.
And now the power of the good has retired into the region of the beautiful. For measure and symmetry are beauty and virtue all the world over.
True.
Also, we said that truth was to form an element in the mixture.
Certainly.
Then, if we are not able to hunt the good with one idea only, with three we may catch our prey. Beauty, symmetry, truth are the three, and these taken together we may regard as the single cause of the mixture, and the mixture as being good by reason of the infusion of them.
Quite right.
And now, Petrarchus, any man could decide well enough whether pleasure or wisdom is more akin to the highest good and more honourable amongst gods and men.
Clearly, and yet perhaps the argument had better be pursued to the end.
I knew he was going to say that. We must take each of them separately in their relation to pleasure and mind and pronounce upon them, for we ought to see to which of the two they are severally most akin.
Are you speaking of beauty, truth, or measure?
Yes, Petrarchus. Yes, Petrarchus, take truth first, and after passing in review mind, truth, pleasure, pause a while and make answer to yourself as to whether pleasure or mind is more akin to truth.
There is no need to pause, for the difference between them is palpable. Pleasure is the veriest impostor in the world, and it is said that in the pleasures of love, which appear to be the greatest, perjury is excused by the gods, for pleasures, like children, have not the least particle of reason in them,
By the gods.
whereas mind is either the same as truth or the most like truth and the truest.
Shall we next consider measure in like manner, and ask whether pleasure has more of this than wisdom, or wisdom than pleasure?
Here's another question which may be easily answered, for I imagine that nothing can ever be more immoderate than the transports of pleasure, or more in conformity with measure than mind and knowledge.
Very good, but there still remains the third test. Has mind a greater share of beauty than pleasure? And is mind or pleasure the fairer of the two?
No one, Socrates, either awake or dreaming, ever saw an imagined mind or wisdom to be in aught unseemly at any time, past, present, or future.
Right?
But when we see someone indulging in pleasures, perhaps in the greatest of pleasures, the ridiculous or disgraceful nature of the action makes us ashamed. And so we put them out of sight and consign them to darkness under the idea that they ought to not meet the eye of the day.
And Petrarchus, you will proclaim everywhere by word of mouth to this company, and by messengers bearing the tidings far and wide, that pleasure is not the first of possessions, nor yet the second, but that in measure and the mean and the suitable and the like, the eternal nature has been found.
Yes, that seems to be the result of what has been now said.
And the second class is contained, in the second class is contained the symmetrical and beautiful and perfect or sufficient, and all which are of that family.
True.
And if you reckon in the third class, mind and wisdom, you will not be far wrong, if I divine aright.
I dare say.
And would you not put in the fourth class the goods which we were affirming to appertain specially to the soul, sciences and arts and true opinions as we call them? These come after the third class and form the fourth, as they are certainly more akin to good than pleasure is.
Surely.
The fifth class are the pleasures which were defined by us as painless, being the pure pleasures of the soul herself, as we termed them, which accompany some the sciences and some the senses.
Perhaps.
And now, as Orpheus says, with the sixth generation ceased the glory of my song. Here at the sixth award, let us make an end. All that remains is to set the crown on our discourse.
True.
And let us sum up and reassert what has been said, thus offering the third libation to the saviour Zeus.
How?
Philebus affirmed that pleasure was always and absolutely the good.
I understand. This third libation, Socrates, of which you spoke, meant a recapitulation.
Revisiting. Yes, but listen to the sequel. Convinced of what I have just been saying and feeling indignant at the doctrine which is maintained, not by Philebus only, but by thousands of others, I affirmed that mind was far better and far more excellent as an element of human life than pleasure.
True.
But suspecting that there were other things which were also better, I went on to say that if there was anything better than either, then I would claim the second place for mind over pleasure, and pleasure would lose the second place as well as the first.
You did.
Nothing could be more satisfactorily shown than the unsatisfactory nature of both of them.
Very true.
The claims both of pleasure and mind to be the absolute good have been entirely disproven in this argument, because they are both wanting in self-sufficiency and also in adequacy and perfection.
Most true.
But though they must both resign in favour of another, mind is 10,000 times nearer and more akin to the nature of the conqueror than pleasure.
Certainly.
And according to the judgment which has now been given, pleasure will rank fifth.
True.
But not first. No, not even if all the oxen and horses and animals in the world by their pursuit of enjoyment proclaim her to be so. Although the many trusting them, as diviners trust in birds, determine that pleasures make up the good of life, and deem the lusts of animals to be better witnesses than the inspirations of divine philosophy.
And now, Socrates, we tell you that the truth of what you have been saying is approved by the judgment of all of us.
And will you let me go?
There is little which yet remains, and yet I will remind you of it, for I am sure that you will not be the first to go away from an argument.
Oh,
Hey, we got there, Matt.
we got there. We
Yeah,
got there.
Yeah.
All right. What I love about Socrates' approach is just that he's teaching us that we need to always explore the terrain more than we think we can. And just by just showcasing, he's talking to people who are very certain, they seem very rigorous about where they came to their judgments in all of these dialogues, and they could back it up with a certain degree of impressive like logic to support whatever position they wish to support. But he's always able to showcase that context is everything, and there's places that you could have looked before you came to your judgment that you didn't explore.
Yeah.
Well, let's do that now, and as we do that, let's continuously revisit some of those assumptions you made along the way, and see if things have changed as we've appreciated this this darkened room in more definition than we thought possible.
It's interesting. Kelly made the comment that, when you're reading something like this, sometimes it's hard to follow the argument. And the language, unfortunately for us, given the context of where we are now in time, is somewhat convoluted. It's hard to follow some of the language, and yet the ideas being expressed are actually pretty simple. And exactly as you just said, that, when you consider things like the difference between wisdom and pleasure, there's an awful lot of questions that you have to ask, or that you should, or that you could consider.
Yeah.
And Plato in his dialogue seems to be an absolute master at that, forcing you to consider things that your mind alone wouldn't necessarily lead you towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's quite something. And what I really liked about this dialogue too is that we entered it. It's got the thing that I noticed about like the great universal classical tragedies and plays especially is that there's always an implied context outside of the frame of the theatrical play that you're witnessing that posits your mind to think about, well, what else is going on before, after, outside of what's happening on the stage, right? Also in paintings too, like the greatest of the paintings, the subject of it is not within the frame of the painting. The painting is designed to convey an irony that'll get your mind to think about something outside of the painting, and then right, just think. And the same thing with the Platonic dialogues, and this one especially. Like, we've just walked into a dialogue. It didn't start at the beginning. It started as they had already been clearly debating for a while, pleasures versus mind, and we just entered into it kind of as we were walking to the room. um in midway the motion was already in place. So I just really like that too. But he yeah.
Yes, a fun one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm
But it was
still hoping at some point, Matthew, and I won't labour this one too long. It would be interesting if we could have a go at the Republic one time.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
I think
we will. We certainly
yeah.
will.
The reason I suggest that we've done a lot of Platonic dialogues, Theaetetus and a few others, and the one that we've just done. But it seems to me that the Republic is just a central dialogue that lots of people associate it with lots of things like fascism, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
And yet within this community, I'm sure Quan will back me up on this, that is not how we would see it. So it'll be interesting to see how we read through that and avoid the pitfalls that others do.
That's
Yes,
an awfully long book, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
No,
relatively.
well, it's 10 books, but I would say that what is important in the Republic precisely, it's about the first timeless form, justice or beauty, right? And what is important is to reach to that first timeless form, because once you're in the infinite awareness, which first timeless form is beauty precisely, you're in safe zone. You you will automatically go to goodness and truth. It's simply a question of time. So all the classical education is to bring you from social sophistication, which is the highest form of the animal kingdom, to that first timeless form of beauty expressed as justice in time, and as many stuff, but justice being the highest form in time of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Can I say something?
Rick, hey man, yeah, absolutely.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just getting used to this mic. Somebody mentioned Plato and the Republic being fascist, and I could see how that this subordination of the instrumental and the pleasure, the subordination of that to the highest good, an abstract good, like capitalists and Ayn Randian and um Austrian school, free market fundamentalist, tend to construe that as being duty to the state, like you're marching, like we the living, where everyone's desires and pleasures are being subordinated to the state. So that's where a lot of these ideas about Plato being fascist come from. I don't agree with these people. I'm having disputes with some friends of mine about this. So I had some friends who are hardcore into Ayn Rand, and we've been having some debates about Plato versus Aristotle. And but I could see where someone who is of that persuasion would read that part about the subordination of these other lower forms of pleasure to the higher good. I could see where they would construe that to be an excuse to implement government power, to suppress business and suppress markets and cause people to sacrifice, and to have to sacrifice. But I've been developing. I don't know if you've gotten my emails, Matt, but I've been developing this idea about sacrifice and what I think it really is, and how the Newtonian concept of there's no free lunch, that you can't have it too good, is a restoration of Baal worship, Ashtoreth worship, because if you think about it, the idea that you have to kill babies in order to bring the rains or the harvest, which is what the Near East, Mesopotamia, they were under that widespread conception. And so I don't know. Would you? I was wondering. I wanted to ask you what you thought of that.
That that's certainly an extreme perversity of the good.
Yeah.
To, yeah. I don't I
Well,
don't I
what was
wouldn't
that?
disagree with the gist of that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sadly,
yeah,
it persists today.
In some ways, right? The whole depopulation Gaia cult in so many ways has a lot of the elements of that
Oh yeah.
misanthropic idea that we need to do unfortunate things that reduce the quality of life of people or even the overall quantity of people through a variety of controlled famines, things like that. That's part of our life that we live in order to do the good, to save nature from humans. And that's an ethos, which is, yeah, it
It's
very
under the
much is
surface, but
the
it's there.
absolute literal reading of maybe Plato's Republic, extracted of any concern for justice completely and applied in a completely literal fashion. Um,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
But I would suggest the following interpretation.
Mm.
You have the animal kingdom by line 1, 2, 3, meaning sense perception, intellect, and social sophistication. And you have the upper trigram made by beauty, goodness, and truth. There is an absolute symmetry between the two. Okay, so line 1 of the animal kingdom correspond to line 4 of the infinite awareness. Line 2, intellect, correspond to goodness, and line 3, social sophistication, correspond to truth. So the what is discussed right now is the typical uh, interpretation of the democratic man of something that is higher, that is not of his domain. And if you are not prepared at the level of precisely of infinite awareness, you might be convinced of his mumbo jumbo, but that discourse would not be bought by you if you have enough infinite awareness precisely.
Yeah.
Whose mumbo jumbo you talking about?
For example, the example that has been given, okay, that you have to sacrifice baby for the common good because the sacrifice
Okay.
of babies would bring down rain. Well, that kind of reasoning in the animal kingdom is perfectly acceptable, which is a caricature. As I said, there is a symmetry. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1 correspond to 4, 2 correspond to 5, and 3 correspond to 6. Okay, it's a simple way to say that there are correspondences, and those correspondences show precisely that the fake democratic man or the sophist, the highest person, the highest epistemological person within the animal kingdom, will spring on kind of opinions that they will call truth, and which might appear quite convincing if you don't have the level of awareness that is needed to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but
Yeah.
for someone having developed his epistemological level, it is simply laughable. Okay, for example, the ship and the shipbuilding. Okay, I I I I dare say that it's not even for someone at the aristocratic level or at the true democratic level. Someone having a little bit of common sense would understand that shipbuilding is the means for making ships because ships are needed for some human desire or needs. Okay, so common sense. I would dare say that common sense is somewhere using my usual uh, image of the hexagram because I think it's easy and it's convenient. Common sense is somewhere between 3 and 4. Okay, between the social sophistication and the idea of justice or of beauty that is strongly in your heart.
Yeah.
For someone that is have the idea of justice and beauty strongly in his heart, he doesn't even have to think.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that the
It's
fact that
instinctual in a sense. It becomes
it's intuitional. Okay,
yeah.
he does. He okay. I'm a little bit pedantic. I prefer to use instinct for the first line. Okay, because I think that words matters. Uh, in the sense of someone that is at the fourth line having beauty or the sense of justice, that person doesn't need to activate the third line or second line, which are the intellects and the social sophistication. Okay, when we say that insight is an intuition, it means that the answer appear in the space of your mind without activating the operation of the mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, or to use religious vocabulary, it's a direct vision. Okay, and once again, the sophists could use that kind of vocabulary that are used very ordinarily by the master of meditation, direct view vision, to spin their mumbo jumbo. Okay, I always repeat that because everything that has been created by the master of meditation throughout the ages has been used by the imbeciles to spin their mumbo jumbo at a lower level.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, I think when you see that everything Socrates is doing in every one of his dialogues, and especially in the Republic, they're all exercises on self knowledge, and that comes with this idea of a balance, of a harmony of the soul, like how we can come into harmony with our true nature. How can we discover nature? And you can't answer that directly. Like you can't just say, here's what's the meaning to life. Well, here it is. Like it doesn't work that way. You kind of always have to approach these things laterally. Look at the context of something that is being ignored, but is necessary to get at the question that we all yearn to ask, because we're all human. So it's part of the mystery of being human is that natural. It's like our body needs to breathe, or it needs food, or our minds and our souls. It's hard to even differentiate mind soul. It's a weird thing, but I mean, I know there's faculties that are different to each thing, but the yearning that we have, the hunger that we have to find purpose, or find out what is that purpose that we were designed into the universe to fulfill, is something we all have, and Plato is always satisfying that in all of his dialogues.
But I think that the skill of this dialogue is precisely not to talk about hunger and thirst, which are very down to earth and primitive impulses or drives. I want to stress the absolute skill of this dialogue when he devoted a big part. I would estimate that to 30%. A big part of the dialogue to emotions. Okay, and he gave a lot of emotions like envy, like fear, like joy, like love, like emulation. He even took the example of emulation. Okay, I was absolutely delighted. I want to make the rapprochement between envy and emulation, because we would never think that those two stuff are very close. In envy, you have a positive part, that is, you wish something that you think positive for yourself, but at the same time, that envy can push you to jealousy, meaning you want the destruction of the person having the stuff that you wish for. Okay, the example that he said, that there's a pain in envy, but there's also a pleasure when you see the house of your neighbor burned down because you were envious of the house of your neighbor. Okay, that example was absolutely perfect to illustrate that envy is a mixed emotion. But emulation too is a mixed emotion, even if most of the time we think to emulation as something noble. Emulation is something noble, but still it's mixed. Okay, emulation is when you look up to someone and you desire to have the noble qualities of that person. But in that desire, you have an element which is negative, which is envy. But the slight difference with emulation and envy is that in emulation, it is a little bit better because you would be ready to make the effort to get the quality that you desire. Because emulation, contrary to envy, can most of the time is about objects. Okay, even if it could be about quality too. But emulation is more focused on qualities than object, since emulation is a kind of envy, but with the willingness to make an effort, if you want. And I am absolutely delighted that he mentioned emulation in the emotions, because it is an emotion. And from there, from that human reality of emotions, he would spring to the ship versus shipbuilding. Okay, the art versus the arithmetical art versus the philosophical arithmetic. And there he would go to the timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth, that he would give the six levels of truth, goodness, the beautiful, the mind and wisdom, the science, and the activity, dialectical activity of the soul, the painless pleasure, and finally, at the last, the pleasure, which is a mix. So And once again, I repeat myself, the absolute skill is to go directly to what is the most present in all human lives, not hunger and thirst, okay, but emotion. And I want, and here it's, let's not forget that Socrates was speaking to born aristocrat or aristocratic man. So speaking to those people of hunger and thirst is not useful because those people don't experience hunger and thirst. He was skillful enough to go to what those people experience the most, emotions. And if there is one emotion that is very prevalent in the upper class, it's envy.
And
Okay, because you can have 100 million, but you wouldn't want 200 million, 300 million, 1 billion. And it is absolutely skillful to mention envy and emulation, emulation being the superior form of envy.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good
So
point.
Protarchus, he was some rich guy's kid.
Probably.
yeah,
Be sure that everyone except the slave which appear in Plato dialogue were either born aristocrat or high middle class members having aristocratic proclivities.
Yes. Monty.
Yes, Quan, I was wondering if you could address something. It sparked something in my mind, speaking about beauty, wisdom, and beauty, goodness, and truth, which in some ways in the Christian epistemology, it loved truth and life. But in any case, I've never heard it connected with the forms before, the circle, the square, and the triangle. And that just kind of sparked something in me insofar as the quadrature of the circle, and the circle really representing motion and no form or heaven. Could you elaborate on that a little bit about which one represents which and how it breaks down?
I would like to let Jean-Sébastien do it since he was the guy who introduced it. Let him talk.
Great, because I had a question about quite the same subject with beauty, truth, and goodness. At one moment in what we read, Socrates swapped goodness for symmetry. Is symmetry the way to show goodness in separating stuff equally? That's a thought I had. And for the body, soul, and mind, I'd say body is the square, soul is the triangle, and mind is the circle. Maybe I am wrong, but this is my experience, because body is made of the four parts, the four elements, the four cardinal, etc. The mind is limitless, like a circle that is not closed, and the soul is made of the triangle, because the mind, the Holy Spirit, body, and spirit.
I confirm that is the Kabbalistic traditional interpretation.
Yeah. Thanks.
But Jean-Sébastien, I gave you the answer concerning symmetry and goodness. I gave the answer at the beginning.
Yeah, it was quite subtle.
Okay, I repeat my answer. When if you remember at the beginning, I said that harmony is the dialectical dance between the finite and the infinite, between becoming and being. Okay. Well, that's the symmetry between being and becoming.
So goodness. It is symmetry that is goodness.
Yes, the symmetry is the balance, the dance between.
Like the yin yang too.
Yes, if you remember, I was protesting at the beginning, okay, when Kenley said that, well, we never talk about a definition about good or the goodness. I protested by saying, no, I did not give a philosophical definition, but I gave last time an operational definition. And that operational definition was precisely the dance, the symmetry between the animal kingdom and the infinite awareness, or between becoming and being, or between the lower trigram and the upper trigram, or between time and timelessness. Okay, that is why Socrates said that symmetry is a synonym for goodness or the good.
Right.
There's a symmetry, there's a balance.
Yes. If I can add the last one comment, I feel like after all this, Socrates is having fun with his student, pronouncing about dualities. He takes everything, put it back in a dual perspective, and swap the opinion of his student around by this way. And symmetry, being in the middle, is swapping from one to the other that he does to his student all the times. It's
but
not so
that's
complicated.
no, that's the fun of dialectical
Yes.
conversation. Okay, because the difference between didactics and dialectics is that didactics, you give your definition, you give your example, and you discuss after. Dialectics is you would take stuff that is from your personal experience. This time is emotions, okay, and from emotion you would go by spiral, okay. You wouldn't go up, but by spiral. Okay, that is dialectics. And the play of dialectic is precisely sometimes you would use another word for the same thing just to check if your students are really listening and not stupidly just memorizing the definition.
Like
Because
goodness.
dialectics is to make you capable to make your own definitions.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this idea also, when you look at these obvious dualisms in the universe, the way Plato does, and all potent thinkers do, it's recognized that there's a playful inversion that you could start playing around with because when you start seeing that no, there's not one reality, there are these two coexistent realities, and when you become sensitive to them, you could have a lot of fun to the point that, in the Gorgias dialogue, it's a great example where he's approaching somebody who's a super influential sophist. And his students are there, and it's a very hostile environment, kind of like this environment that we were just experiencing here, because we have to keep in mind he's got the teacher, this influential teacher, Philebus. His student is having one, and there's a bunch of his students all around who are brainwashed by Philebus. So Socrates is he's very courageous to be in that environment and maintain this type of challenging attitude, but in a playful way, which allows him to, I think, keep his head on. But in the Gorgias, he there's this presumption that the greatest good is because it's all about how to live the good life. And everyone thinks, well, the greatest tyrant with the greatest power to impose their will and punish their enemies and satisfy their desires and have more desires that they satisfy and have the power to satisfy, that's the happiest life. And Socrates just says, no, that's actually the most slavish, pitiful, unhappy life, actually. And everyone's like, what? You just turned it inside out. And he actually said, no, the just men who might seem like they materially are not in the best place are actually in a happier place than the tyrant, who's the most pathetic, or that type of tyrant, who's actually a total slave, because he's aware that there is this higher thing called the soul and a whole domain of universals that all of the people he's talking to are not aware of. So if they're just living on the material domain, it appears that Socrates is crazy, but Socrates has challenged them to realize that no, they forgot to think about the real actual existence of this higher domain, in which case all of the opposite of everything that they hold dear is actually true. So
could I add one question for everybody to discuss about? It's about when he talked about the pleasure and the pain. Pain, pleasure, I put it on the same on a duality. At first we talk about wisdom and pleasure, and wisdom is higher than pleasure because pleasure is equal to pain in the opposite way, I think. Just wondering if we could put all pleasures with the virtue and all pain with the vices, the vice. Sorry for the French accent.
good question.
So that's a question I'm throwing out
question
to everybody to think about, when a vice could be a good pleasure, because pleasure from vice is still pleasure, but not necessarily good for a future generation or essence, as they put it up. And the pleasure we seek to find in the truth and the beauty are almost all connected with virtue all the time. So would a pleasure of vice be a pain, and a pain of virtue be a pleasure? That's the end of it.
Very good. I would actually let that resonate. For anybody also listening on YouTube, think about what Jean-Sebastien just threw out there and chew on it for a while. Write a submission, write your thoughts out, and send it to the Rise and Tide Foundation, info@riseandtidefoundation.net. We'd love to hear what you have to say. That's a fantastic question, Sebastian.
Thanks.
I want to give a little hint for everyone. Okay, it has to do with the infinite and the finite.
Okay, it's the one clue people listening online get. All of it.
And the dance between them.
Can I say something? Or
yeah, Rick. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just thinking about this becoming and being and becoming and finite and infinite. The one thing that's, I don't know if this is relatable to what we're talking about tonight, but one of the things I think about is the goodness of it, of always asymptotically approaching but never reaching the good, never reaching perfection, but always asymptotically approaching it. The reason why that's good is because if you did reach perfection, life would be boring. Things would just stop, and there would be nothing left to strive for. There would be no more challenges to. There'd be no more problems to solve or new things to create. Right. So that's the one thing that I want to bring up, but then the other thing I want to bring up is, and I think this is where a lot of people get it wrong about cultures. Cultures are not static elements. They're in time, and they are becoming something. So, when people say that good German engineering, well, how did that happen? Well, it didn't start off being that way. They weren't just inherently born that way. It became that way because of some decisions that were made with Frederick List, industrial policy, and to reorient Germany's society toward being more productive. And so, cultures go through these almost like a metronome. They harmonize, they get in sync, and they get on a roll, and they start really taking off for a while. And then people look at that, and they develop a reputation out of that and make that a permanent thing. They make the temporary into a permanent. And that's where a lot of racism, bigotry, and a lot of crappy ideas about culture come from, because then the assumption is the other cultures cannot achieve that, right? So I don't know, just two thoughts I want to throw out there.
I'm pretty sure the Germans are just racially superior in general. Their pure Volk spirit.
Well, no,
just made them more brilliant.
There's this saying, "Good German engineering," right? But would that statement have been would that have been true in 1700?
Absolutely, no. I do totally appreciate that observation. Very, very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say that this question is more psychology than philosophy, in the sense that it's philosophy too, because it's never psychology alone. I think that all psychological question has a philosophical consequence, a philosophical rapprochement. That's the question of identifications. Okay, if a nation or person achieves something glorious, and it can be factually glorious, the identification would make it something forever. Okay, but that's something that is frozen forever, cannot be frozen forever, because we are speaking of a reality in the becoming dimension. And in the becoming dimension, you can never escape a change. Okay, we all know the historical law that when you reach to the apex of your civilization, the next step is going down more or less fast. So that is here that the goodness of the dance between the becoming dimension and the timeless reality of being is the goodness, precisely because the goodness that would make you capable of maintaining the everlasting civilization, historically speaking, is precisely not to be frozen in the time dimension or in the becoming dimension, and to be in the infinite awareness and the being dimension. And the paradox here is that because you are in the being dimension, you will be capable to change, but to change in a spiral, okay, and not to change in a circle. Because when you change in a circle, let's say that this point is the point of apex. You reach to apex, you will go round to decadence and decline. Okay, a little bit like the revolution of the planet around the sun. Okay, you wouldn't go to winter, you wouldn't go to spring, you wouldn't go to summer, and you wouldn't go back to winter.
Yeah.
The only
Well,
way to escape that circle in time in the mind is precisely to go to timelessness. There you will escape that time circularity that exists in reality in the phenomena, but in the mind we can escape that law of material phenomena. I cannot resist to quote Kepler. He was speaking of the law of the tangible thing and the law of the immaterial and non-localized things. Okay, that's why I love so much his expression. The laws about the material and localized things, and the law about the non-localized things. Before the 20th century, he was already using that expression.
So the way to, okay, let me say, there's a way to escape Animal Farm. Revolution is 360 degrees. People don't think about that. If you start out tyranny, you end up back at tyranny. Is the way to escape Animal Farm is to take the ideas that were generated during the revolution and set them aside into this eternal thing, and then so you can retrieve them later. And so when the revolution falls apart, you can pick up the pieces of what worked and what didn't, and because I'm starting to think that half revolution is really where it's at. They say in Christianity, repentance is 180 degrees, doing the opposite of what you did before, right? So
yeah, but up.
What's that?
Spiral.
Yes, but up. Okay,
spiral, yeah.
You turn 180 degree, but at the same time you go up.
I like the idea of never closing your circle.
I would like to give another example. I think we all read, or at least we heard of the book called The Fourth Turning. Okay, the idea of the fourth turning, that is easy time makes weak man, and weak man makes tough time, and tough time make strong man, and strong man makes good times, and good times make weak man, and etc. Okay, that is perfectly the image of the one-dimensional circle. Okay, because there is no epistemological adventure.
Yeah.
Okay, and yes, of course, when there is no epistemological adventure, absolutely, strong men make good times make weak man make difficult times, and blah blah blah. That is the law of the animal kingdom, but we can escape the laws of the animal kingdom.
I would suggest that sentence underpins almost all of your work, man.
What? Trying to.
I mean, yeah. I mean, take an example of, the revolution, if you like, 1776, the two great documents. Okay, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, and the way in which America these days seems to be turning its back on both of those documents. And yet there is a clamor, not just from you, but from myriad people, to revisit those documents and to extract the best of them and use that as a foundation for bringing back the best of the intentions in those documents. Remembering that the documents themselves, of course, were written by slave owners and various people who certainly didn't have what I would consider to be right thinking in the current context. Nonetheless, the essence of the ideas can be reevaluated, which one I'm sure you would agree is it's a spiral all of a sudden. It's not a closed circle, etc., etc. I mean, in so many of the discussions that I listen to these days, that seems to be one of the central points, that if we're ever going to get out of the malaise that we're in at the moment, it's by reevaluating some of the best of the ideas that we've had in the past. I mean, as I said, it underpins so much of your work, for example.
Well, I was thinking a lot about, again, the issue of the Republic was brought up by you, Paul, and it everything that has just been said was also a driving factor in Plato's considerations when he's describing the cyclical problem of a society that will go from, an oligarchy into a tyranny, into a democracy, into a democracy will degenerate into mob rule, and then you'll have to restore order, and then you'll get a tyranny to restore the order, which will decay into a blah blah. And yes, it's a total cycle, and all of that is always going to happen to the degree that people don't examine, they don't embark, as Quan says, on the epistemological journey. As long as they don't actually challenge themselves to ask those fundamental questions that were neglected to be asked in the Republic at certain key moments when everything was going in a certain direction. A question about the fundamental nature of what is human nature and are we different from animals was addressed as a question, was never answered, was not explored. And it was just assumed that, oh yeah, humans, guardians are just like training dogs. Yeah, if you want to learn how to train the guardians, you learn how to just look at how we breed dogs. And as soon as you allow that type of lazy ass assumption in, that reduces us and our nature to the nature of other species, sure, everything else cyclically will naturally just follow. Nobody will discover that there's this incredible journey to embark upon to be a human. They won't know. But this is what people like the founding fathers were reading, right? They were thinking, that's why they called it a republic. They were Platonists who drove that process. They were thinking about what do we need to do to resolve this cyclical problem that's trapped humanity in for generations in this feudalism, mob rule, blah blah blah. And it's like it's there in the Constitution, in the Declaration. The key is there, but then walking the walk is another thing. So as you said, it's people fell short as people living in the material world with their material problems and finiteness and prejudices, but the ideas are solid. They are universal, and as long as we can like revisit and explore those and act accordingly, then there's all of the problems that are facing us can be resolved. But if we stop trying, we create problems for ourselves.
A small pedantic remark, which might be useful. The Greek word for the republic, well, first republic, res publica, means the common good, right? But the Greek title, which is the original title of the republic, is politeia. And politeia doesn't mean the common good. Politeia means the constitution, but not in the sense of the American Constitution, in the sense of the constitution of the cities. And what is outstanding with Plato is that the word constitution of the cities is put in perfect rapprochement with the types of constitution of the different kind of soul of the people in a certain type of city. Okay, so you have the constitution of the democratic man, which would produce a democratic city, a plutocratic man, which would produce a plutocratic city, the fake democratic man, which produce a fake democratic city, the democratic man, justice, which would produce a democratic city, the aristocratic man, justice, valor, humanity, which would produce an aristocratic city, and the philosopher king, who would produce a philosophical city, justice, valor, humanity, wisdom. Okay, so the idea was the epistemological journey, but translated in political reality. That that I like fancy expression that I call it the axio-epistemo-political triangle, because the axio is precisely the dimension of the timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth. Epistemo, of course, is for the epistemological journey, and political, of course, is the translation into the different kinds of city corresponding to the kinds of soul. And those soul correspond to different stages of the epistemological journey, precisely, since axio-epistemo-political adventure.
What I would like to say about the weak men produce bad times produce strong men produce good times. I would like to amend that or challenge that a little bit, because that's often used as a justification for austerity and cutting benefits for people, and that's used by right wingers a lot, Jordan Peterson type people. What I would probably put it more as is that when a decision is made to put a society on a path towards development and industrialization, and then that becomes the shining light on the hill. Some people get it in their minds. They develop this hubris, and they start to think they were always that way. They were born that way, and they were just born to succeed. And then that hubris begins to blind them um, to certain realities, like the West right now. It's happening with NATO and their continual drive to maintain dominance, despite the fact that they've hollowed out all their engineering. When I look at what's happening in South Asia, in Africa right now, it reminds me a lot in United Arab Emirates, places like that, with Zimbabwe putting their satellites in orbit for the first time. It reminds me of where Germany was when it started out on its path to, or America was when it started out on its path. They have a want and a need and a drive to build, and they have a growing population, and so they are on the path to greatness. But with the West trying to sabotage that, it's because it's producing. It's not that maybe they're weak. It depends on how you define weak. Weak could be weak-minded. They substitute the eternal the eternal for the transitory, or they think they mistake the finite for the infinite, if that makes any sense.
But the finite precisely need to be renewed at each generation, and the power to renew the finite at each generation is precisely the energy of infinite awareness. And if you don't have that energy of infinite awareness, you would not be capable to renew the glory and the greatness. Okay, because one generation can create greatness and glory, of course, but as everything that is in the animal kingdom, it is subjected to birth, to growth, and to death. Okay, and it's not only for a person; it's also for a society. It's also for a science. It's also for a civilization. So if you don't renew it with the energy of infinite awareness, it wouldn't go down necessarily. And coming back to your question of the people that would use the fourth turning excuse to impose austerity. But once again, that's in the animal kingdom, and the sophists would necessarily use that kind of sophistry to justify their politics. Okay, it's obvious.
Hence the importance of education.
Yeah.
Can I put in some quick thing about the fourth generation? Since we get four division and two are negative, so we go into weak man and weak times. There's this thing that was talked in the higher sphere about the accelerationism. Think you know about this? Fabian Society made it through. Let's accelerate the bad times to enjoy more of the good times.
Yeah.
That's something that's been made, and since Paul, I think it's Paul that said we must revisit some of the old ideas that we had. That's an old idea. And how to put it in new, using duality and opposition. Let's just find ways to keep the good time longer, greater. And it is by beauty and truth, holding as the principle of every daily life, that we can keep a longer good part of the fourth Reich.
Well, that's the only way to renew becoming. Okay, that you get the energy from being precisely. All the other methods are just methods proposed to you by tricksters because they have some questionable intentions.
Yeah.
Guys, this is great. Love these readings. I'm glad we got through it, and it like I said, it really does set the stage really beautifully, and you guys are gonna all see it when we go into some Schiller, starting with one piece of the Sublime, or is it on the Sublime? I forget which one. Anyway, on the he's gonna discuss. Quan, which one is it that I picked out?
Well, I don't know which one you pick up, but you have mainly two choices of the Sublime, the 1783 text. That one is interesting. On the Sublime, her bene is
Yeah.
good also, but I would say both are interesting. But I would say that
Maybe
the
we'll do
first,
both because they're short enough. We might even just do
yes.
both. Both translated by
So
Will Wirtz.
so maybe it would be a good idea to go by chronology because
Yeah.
believe me, the 1793 text is awesome. The first page
Yeah.
is the summary of the Philebus.
It is. It really is. So
Yes,
let's do it.
the
Let's. That's what I was thinking. So, and Schiller's somebody who has really created an art and a science in walking in both worlds, infinite and finite. He knows how to have a good time. He knows how to dress well. He knows good taste, but at the same time, he also knows what justice really is and walks the walk. So Schiller is just such a fantastic portal into resolving a lot of these paradoxes that Plato is also resolved, but Plato's not resolving it in the way that Schiller is on that level. So it'll be fun. We'll do that next week, and we might even read a Schiller poem or two along that journey before we shift gears yet again. But it's all the same thing, right? No matter what we're looking at, the ultimate theme is know thyself at the end of the day. So these are exercises in knowing ourselves.
and
So
practical exercise and never close your circles when you draw them.
never close the circle. That's gonna be a fun one. All right, new challenge. Never close our circles. All right, guys.
And
it was a
before
pleasure.
we
Till
go,
next week.
before
Yes?
we go, Kwan, I hope you enjoyed the music I sent you.
Oh, yes. It's not bad at all, but I want to think about that before giving you my critique.
Oh,
Because,
you don't have to give a critique. If you enjoyed it at all, that's fine by me, mate.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Take care,
Okay.
guys.
Catch you next time, folks.
Cheerio.
Good
Ciao.
night.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Next week.
Bye bye.